Hi, I'm Gareth, and in this video we're going to talk about how to play ornaments, which is something that vexes a lot of people. So when you look at this melody on the board, you can see there's quite a lot of ornamentation within this melody, perhaps rather more than you'd normally find, but it's just a way to try and unpack some of the most common ornaments and explain how to play them. So I'm going to work through this melody and we're just going to sort of take it apart and see how you would identify these ornaments and how you would play them. So first of all, let me play the melody without the ornaments. So from the beginning, without any of these extra notes and not worrying about any of these funny signs for a moment. So this is how the melody goes. And actually hearing it like that makes an important point about ornaments, which is of course that ornaments are there just to ornament a fundamental line. So they're meant to have a kind of subtle effect on the music, a way of decorating it, making it sound even more attractive. And some people say, well, why didn't a composer just write out all the notes in full as he or she would like it played? And that's a fair question. Although sometimes to see it written like this helps you to see where the essential notes of the melody are, and also then to say, well, which are the notes that add some ornamentation to that melody? Okay, let's start to work through this. So looking in the first bar or the first measure here, you can see my melody is going C, E flat, G, and in between this thing here, we've got these half-sized notes. So that's the first thing to notice about them, is that they're kind of half-sized notes. And these things here are called Appoggiaturas. So if you had this sort of half-sized note, doesn't matter if the stem is going up or down, but it's called an Appoggiatura, and that's how you spell it. You sort of spell it how you say it, but two P's, two G's and the spelling might be useful. Now an Appoggiatura takes half the value of the note that follows it. There are certain situations in which it might take 2/3 of the value of a note, or perhaps even 1/3 of the value of the note when the next note is dotted, but let's not go there for now. In this case, half the value of the following note. So if this note is a crotchet and this note is a crotchet or a quarter note, what we're going to do is we're going to assign half of that beat to the Appoggiatura and the other half of the beat to the note. So this ends up being 2 quavers or 2/8 notes, and so does this. So my basic melody in the first bar, the first measure, goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I add the Appoggiaturas, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So do you see how that goes? Appoggiatura also translates into English as a leaning note. So the idea with these is that you lean on them slightly, and that's another good reason for writing them as an ornament rather than just writing 4 quavers, which would be perfectly possible. It just draws the idea that you're going to lean on the Appoggiatura. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You get the idea of leaning on those notes. So that's the Appoggiatura. Not to be confused with the sign that we see at the beginning of the next bar, because you can see here again, there's a sort of half-sized note. This time it's got a line through the corner. By the way, Appoggiaturas sometimes have these little slurs, as do these things. Sometimes they don't. So I've given you examples with a slur, I've given you an example without one. So this one is an Acciaccatura. Okay, so if you have a half-sized note and it's got a little line through the corner, it's one of these. And that translates into English as a crushed note. So in other words, you crush it into the next note. These take half the value of the following note. This one you play as quickly as you can, followed by the next note like this. So it's just crushed into the next note. And if you want to spell that, double C is worth remembering there. So you see and hear the difference between the Appoggiatura and the Acciaccatura. This one is half the value of the following note in most cases, and this one is the quick crush note. Okay, let's have a look at the next ornament at the end of the second bar or second measure, and this is called a turn. Okay, so when you see this sort of S-shaped thing on its side, that's a turn. Now, when you see a turn, what you do is you look at the printed note, but you start on the note above it. Okay, so I've got G here, so I start on the note above, and that's A flat. It's A flat because A flat's in the key signature. So A flat, then I play the printed note G, then I go to the note below, which is F, and then I come back to G. So you start on the note above, you play the printed note, you go to the note below, you come back to the printed note. So even though there's only one note there, I'm going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, okay? So A flat, G, F, G. So you've got to get that to fit inside that beat, something like this. Okay, that would be a turn. Okay, if you're happy about a turn, we'll move on to the next bar. In this bar, we've got a sign that is probably the most familiar ornament sign. Sometimes it's written as TR, sometimes you see TR dot because it's abbreviating Trill. Sometimes you see a sort of longer wiggly line. Sometimes you see TR and a wiggly line. But basically what it means is the fast alternation of the printed note with the note above it. There's a broad principle that says in Baroque and classical music, we start on the note above the printed note, and thereafter we start on the note itself. So if this were a Baroque or classical piece, you'd be alternating E flat and D, starting on the E flat. So how many do you have to do? Doesn't really matter. It's up to you to decide what works best in the music. So it might just be quite a short one, or it might be something longer. You have to make a judgment on that. And sometimes you get these little grace notes at the end. You see these are sort of half-size notes again, not to be confused with these half-size notes, but this is just closing notes on the trill. So it's just kind of making it clear that you're going to alternate E flat and D, and assuming this is a Baroque or a classical piece, you're going to start on E flat, but you're going to incorporate the C and the D at the end. So if I slow it down, you get E flat D, E flat D, E flat D, C, D, just to finish off your trill. Something like that is how you might do it. Now, the interesting thing about this, when answering this question about why don't composers just write out the notes that they want to be played in the rhythm they want them played, is actually when you get something like a trill, it's nice to be a bit free with it. Quite often a trill works well if you start it slightly slowly and speed up into it. And then you may or may not slow down a little bit at the end of the trill. So it becomes a kind of artistic gesture rather than a machine gun fire of notes that are all hemi-demi semiquavers or something, you know. So you can kind of do something a little bit artistic. And you can exercise your imagination and musicianship to help that paint the line. Okay, so that is the one we've just talked about. It's the trill, or you get the sort of long wiggly line, or you get both. There's our trill. In the next bar, the next measure, we've got this little sign here. It looks like a sort of mini McDonald's sign, doesn't it? And this is the sign for a mordent. Okay, so here's the mordent. And what you do with a mordent is to play the printed note, the note above it, and then come back to the printed note. So the note above it is A flat, key signature again. So I'm going to go G, A flat, G. And I'm going to do it reasonably quickly. So if I go from this beginning of the bar, 1, 2, 3. Do you see how that works? It's not ba-da-dum, but ba-da-dum. So it's reasonably quick. So there's the mordent. Note, note above, come back to the note again. Okay, let's have a look at what we've got at the end of at the end of this same bar? Well, you see this turn that we talked about earlier? Well, if I put alongside that, same sign, but with a line through it, then this is an inverted turn. So whenever you see that vertical line through an ornament, it's saying turn the thing upside down. Now, remember when we talked about this term, we said start on the note above, play the printed note, the note below, and come back to the printed note. So if this is an inverted turn, we're going to do that process the other way around, okay? But notice there's a little natural sign under the ornament. So that's just to explain that, because it could appear in other ornaments as well. That's telling me that the note below that you use is going to be an E natural, because the note below F is E, but it should be E flat from the key signature. But the composer here is saying, don't play E flat, play E natural, okay? And you could have an accidental above a note as well, and that would tell you about the note above in the ornament. Okay, now if I play this turn on the same basis that I played this one, I would do exactly the same process but turn it upside down. So I'd have E natural, F, G, F. But there's one further difference. You might notice that this is what we call a turn over a note. Okay, this is a turn after a note because it comes after the note. So the difference is when we did that turn, we went straight into the turn as I've described. In this case, we're going to play this F first and then we're going to do the turn. So we're going to play F and then we're going to play E natural, F, G, F. So you're going to get, okay, so that's the difference between a turn over a note and a turn after a note. And it's also the difference between a turn and an inverted turn. All right, perhaps I should just write turn there so we know what we're talking about. Okay, now in the next bar, the next measure, we've got a sign that looks a bit familiar. This mordent that we talked about here. But can you see it's another one with a little line through it, the vertical line through it. Now, this is what we call a lower mordent. Okay, so we call it an inverted turn when it's upside down, but when we turn the mordent upside down, we call it a lower mordent, just one of those things. It's exactly the same as this mordent, or what's sometimes called an upper mordent, but this time I'm going to play the note E flat, I'm going down one to D, and I'm coming back to E flat again, but doing it reasonably quickly. Okay, then at the end, I've got another lower mordent, but notice again, I've got this accidental underneath the lower mordent that's saying, when you go to B, don't make it B flat as per the key signature, make it B natural. So, T-D-D. Now, if I try now to give you the whole melody with all of those ornaments realized, that's the word we use when you play a piece with ornaments, we say we're realizing the ornaments, it's going to sound like this, okay? And yeah, let's see how we get on with this. I'll do some counting just to help see how some of these appoggiaturas go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see, I'm still playing the melody, I'm still keeping the pulse the same, but all that ornamentation now fits in. And you can see how it transforms the line, doesn't it? Makes it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more expressive. And when you play the ornaments, try to integrate them subtly so that they paint the line and enhance the line without drawing attention to the ornaments. What sometimes happens is, because fingers are sometimes moving quicker on trills and turns and things, those notes get louder and then they kind of stick out, but just make them integrate into the music. It's a little bit like when you go into somebody's house and you go into their lounge, and after you've been there for a while, you see this nice little ornament on the mantelpiece and you think, oh, I hadn't noticed that when I came in, but it just enhances this lounge in some way. But if you go into somebody's lounge and there's some huge great pink elephant in the corner, the first thing that strikes you is the pink elephant and you think, wow, that's a bit big, imposing, a bit loud in this room. It's not a very subtle ornament. So when you are doing ornaments in music, realizing ornaments, make them as subtle as you can and they'll really add something to the music. But I hope that helps people to understand what the signs mean and what they're called, how to play them. Enjoy realizing ornaments.